What advice? It's probably not going to be financial. Uh, the reason why is I think with all the resources today, people like you or people that do free advice or there's information out there, it's easily accessible. Probably something more along the lines of something that's hidden. Um, I would. I never went and saw a counselor after my parents passed until this year, and so that was 7 years after mother, and then 9 years after father. So I'd probably tell myself go see a counselor because that's not what weak people do. That's what people that want to free up their headspace do. So that's the advice that I would probably give.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Growing Money with Sean Trace podcast. I've got a really awesome guest with me today. And would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Zee Barfoot. I run a CPA accounting firm out of Conway, Arkansas, just north of Little Rock by about 30 miles. And I think I'm the youngest CPA firm owner in the state. And so I have a lot of fun just doing that type of thing.
That's awesome. Well, one of the things that, I started this podcast because I didn't get a lot of great financial advice when I was growing up. I was kind of surrounded. I had awesome parents, caring, positive, nurturing, but my parents didn't talk. We didn't talk about money in my house. It was like it didn't come along until it came along. But I started this podcast so that I could answer the questions for my daughter and other people like her. But let's throw this out there, like you bet financial advice. What's the best financial advice you could give someone?
Yeah. Maxing out credit cards,
Got it.
and you want to do that for sure. You want to buy a brand new car every other year, and don't put full coverage on it. You don't need that. That's just what the insurance people tell you to do so you can spend more money with them. And that's the fastest way to wreck your life. The reverse of that is, until yesterday, I got in a car wreck yesterday. Until yesterday, I drove a
Wow, really?
2014 Nissan Altima with about 190,000 miles. And yeah, it eats at you in the back of your head a little bit of, I'm trying to win these big clients and they see me pulling out with my 2014 Altima. But business is good. It's never been better. And it has nothing to do with the car that I drove.
100%.
Of course, you don't want any credit card debt. That's the fastest way to a blunder rather. And making sure the government's paid. I see a lot of, I work in tax, so this is kind of my field, but I'll see people decide not to pay taxes for 5 years. Well, if you're self employed, that's the fastest way to lose your business. Um, that's either income tax or sales tax or whatever it be. Staying on top of that stuff is uber important.
It's interesting because one money lesson that I wish I had have learned when I was younger, and I think that this is something that's so important for so many people, is to be aware of your money, like to be aware of what's going on with your money. Because if you're not aware of it, it can get away from you.
Yeah. I I try to explain it like this. If you're going to go buy a business, what's the first thing you want to look at? Well, you want to see if they make money, how much money they got, where it's going. Are you an attractive business? Especially for the single people out there. Are you an attractive business? Do you know how much you got? Do you know where it's going? Do you know if it's growing or not? That's, I think, how I won my wife. I had good financials and I kept up with them. So I would definitely advise people to treat themselves as a business, not to the nitty gritty of, well, these are our projections for quarter four, but
Right.
you want to know where you're going, especially if you have goals. If you don't really have any goals, that's a different topic, a different podcast, probably not yours, but they're listening to this because they have goals. So if you don't have a way to measure those, and if you don't have a way to track those, then there's no way that you're probably going to hit them.
I love that. Well, right. One of the things too is like I think that people do feel adrift at times, and maybe they don't know what their goals are. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you're talking about. Like that is a whole different topic. But the idea of say I want to I would assume that most people would like to make a little bit more money, save a little bit more money, have a little bit more money. Like we can maybe assume that that's kind of a goal that a lot of people have. I would think maybe not everyone, but but let's say like you go to the gym, and I love gym analogies for fitness, like fitness, financial fitness as well, because like you go into the gym and you're like, I'm going to lift weights. Well, what do you want to accomplish, man? Are you trying to get lean? Are you trying to get toned? Are you trying to get cut? Are you trying to, bulk up? There's going to so many different things that you can do, but if you're not like working toward a goal, I'm certain that the workout, the exercise is going to be good for you, but you might not see the results that you wanted to see if you're not, working on a plan.
I think that's a great analogy, and it's hard to paint a better one.
Yeah. If you were to start from zero today, what would be your first three financial moves that you'd like to make?
Hmm. Well, I started from zero not too long ago, so
I
it's
like
pretty
it.
fresh on mind, right? Brief backstory. I'm not getting into the soppy, sad story of it, but both my parents passed whenever I was a teenager, and they neither had life insurance. Right?
Oh, wow.
They did not make the financial decisions that were wise. They neither had a will or a trust, and so I had to go through probate and all the good stuff. Well, so my first experience with that would lead me to I'd have life insurance for the people that depend on me no matter what. Because that left me in a weird spot, paying bills and selling stuff, and a lot of unnecessary burden that a simple life policy, not a whole life or any of that stupid stuff, but just a flat term to get you through, if something did happen to you. Number one, no brainer. I have plenty of life insurance on myself for my daughter, and my wife. Number two, I would try and differentiate myself to become the most valuable self that I could be.
Ooh,
Now, that's not much of a money thing, but that leads to money, if that makes sense. In my field, in accounting, we're known for not answering emails, not having good bedside manner, not walking the client through the tax return. Just, hey, here's your stuff. It's done. No forward planning. So, what is my firm built around? Those four things. And so, it's a really easy differentiator. I think it's what led to a lot of growth. So, that's number two. And then number three, um, if you're a single person and want to stay single, that's great. I'd keep that in the front of my mind. If you're wanting to get married, I think that's one of the most important things, decisions you make is who you get married to. If you have different beliefs about money, it can be very difficult to survive together.
yeah.
And so I think that was the best decision that I made early on was getting married to somebody that keeps my she keeps my budget in check per se.
Mm,
She's not the go spender type of woman. She makes sure that I'm not going and spending. So
that's awesome. Well, and it's like I love that you brought up like money mindset and like how people interact with money, because that's something that I've had so many guests that came on and they were talking about people and like money relationships. And one of the things that they were saying was, one of my early guests came on and was talking about couples and the challenges they had. And he said, like, when he started talking to couples about their money and some of the challenges in their marriage, one of the things that he found out was like people weren't having marriage problems. They were having money problems that were causing marriage problems. And oftentimes there was this fundamental disconnect between the way that people would interact around money. One person would sit there and be, super loving to go shopping or love the big dinners out. And, if that's what you value, if your thing is big dinners and you budget for that, good for you, not judging how someone does it. But the other person was like, they really wanted to be focusing on saving or, just these different approaches. And there was a lot of dissonance there. I know that from family members that I had, um, one person wanted to build equity And one family member wanted to build equity. They wanted to buy a house. And the other one was more interested in, experiences and, going out and buying things, and had some money status stuff in there, and was going out and racking up credit card debt because they wanted to show stuff. And I sit there and I look at it, and these people had the opportunity to buy this house out in the Napa Valley, but out further out in the Napa Valley, because that's where I grew up when it wasn't crazy expensive. And now it's insane, absolutely insane. But these people had the opportunity to buy a house there. They're like, well, it's a little bit pricey at 300,000. That same house is now worth, I think, 3 million. And and if they had have gotten in on it, the equity that they would have built just in that property would have been insane. And why I'm bringing this up is because their different money beliefs prevented them from making any moves on that. And that led to further problems, which eventually led to, part of it was the reason that that marriage ended for these family members. And so, like, I've seen it firsthand, man. So money mindset is really powerful, especially when it comes to couples.
Yeah, people love to diss on Dave Ramsey. It's just because he's the biggest icon in the finance realm. Typically, people know who he is.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to point holes in one thing you said 6 years ago, right? Now, I'm not saying that I'm a full belief Dave guy. Everybody has their own opinion, but he has approached it from the emotional and mindset perspective, to get everybody on the same page rather than the analytical efficiency mindset. Um, which I completely understand, and it appeals and it sells and it actually converts way more people than any analytical spreadsheet mindset would ever do. So I think that's probably why he has that approach, and it's also why it's so successful. It speaks to people.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
go ahead.
right? No, no, you're spot on. Like, I know some people, especially in the financial professionals, are like, "Oh, well, I'm not a huge fan of Dave Ramsey, this or that." I was like, but there are a lot of people who are getting a lot of help from what he's talking about. So he's got to be onto something, There's got to be something there. And I mean, and you're right, because I mean, there are so many people that are like, this is the logical way to do it. Yeah, man, but we're not logical beings. If we were logical beings, everyone would be making the right financial decisions, but we're emotional. We're like, hey, this thing makes me feel happy. I'm going to go and buy 25 of them. You don't need 25. You don't even need one. But like, that's kind of how people operate,
One of my favorite things he's ever said to somebody, and it was kind of tacky, but the guy was like, "Well, don't you think I should be doing this instead? Because mathematically it makes more sense." And he was like, "Well, you probably wouldn't be calling in if everything you did was mathematically made the most sense." Right?
Right?
So,
Well, I mean, exactly. The simple fact, but I mean, got to give the guy credit for calling, and I think that that's one of the things that when I start looking at my money mindset, I get really scared. I deal with, like, I talked to my wife about this. I deal with, like, low grade panic at times, and it comes on in certain places. When I was a kid, I had this really bad experience flying. We were going down the runway, and the plane had like a generator that blew up on the runway. Big loud explosion. The cabin was like smoky, smelly. And the pilot gets on the intercom. He's like, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have some good news and bad news. Good news is, uh, or the bad news is we lost a generator on the plane, and the good news is we're lucky it happened on the ground." And I'm just like, "Say what?" And even still to this day, I flew back to Southeast Asia last night from California, and we flew over a patch of turbulence that was about an hour long. It was the shakiest flight I've been on. And when we were landing, we had to have dropped about 50 feet. It was just like this sudden burst of air. We dropped, 50 feet when we were landing. We were still a ways out. It was still, about 2 minutes before we landed, but it was noticeable, and everyone was screamed. my point being, you know, I get these feelings of panic. Like, it's very substantial whenever I fly. But yet, I know a lot of people that get that emotional response to money. They start talking about money, and these fears start triggering for them, and like it freaks them out pretty severely, you know? And I'm not going to lie, for the longest time, that was me too. This podcast has been one of the things that's helped me because just talking to people about money has been very therapeutic for me,
Yeah.
But it's like, I was willing to take a chance. And I think, I hope that other people can be willing to start taking those chances to talk to someone and sharing and learning about money beliefs as well, man.
Yeah. I think once people understand that money is inanimate, it only
Yeah.
does what you tell it to do. And as long as it's being conducted properly, it can work for you or against you. It's in your control rather than somebody else's. That plane, that pilot, the weather, there's a whole bunch of things that you can't control. If
Right.
you're a believing person, you think it's God that's in control of it. But it's not you when you get down to it. The money, different story. That's
Yeah.
it can be all you. Now, car wrecks, those things do happen, but they're very abnormal, right? I was in a
Yeah.
car wreck yesterday. It was small, everybody's fine, but now we've got insurance and money involved, and that was out of my control. But I take care of everything else that is in my control to where that's not really an
Yes.
issue. So, um, I'm not going to say there's a lack of accountability out there. I don't think that's what it is. I think the mindset is everything happens to me rather than
Mm.
this is something that I can control and take advantage of or take the reins on.
I like that. I like that, taking the reins on, because um you're right, there is a lot of people that are just like, they feel like they're on an out of control horse, and they don't realize that they're sitting there holding the reins. I've been on an out of control horse before. I remember when I was riding a horse here, and I love tangents and side stories, but they always come back to a point. I was riding a horse here in Vietnam, and I thought it was a gelding, and didn't go and check things at the back of the horse too carefully. But then I suddenly realized, after I got the horse into the yard, they're like, "Go ahead and ride it, just have some fun." And I suddenly realized I was on a stallion, and across the little riding corral was where his girlfriend was fenced up with their baby. And we got into the corral, and no one told me any of this. And I rode when I was a kid. I'm not good at riding. And suddenly this horse took off. He took off because he wanted to get to his wife and their child. And all I knew was, like, in that split second, I was just like, I'm going. We're here on this ride. But then for a moment, I was like, okay, I remember pulling back on the reins. That stops a horse. And I pulled back, not aggressively, but I pulled back, and suddenly he slowed down and he stopped. He didn't necessarily want to walk anymore for me, but I was able to get him stopped. And that was one of the things that I was just like, wow, I had the power to not change the horse's running. I did not have the power to change the horse's mentality, but I did have the power to take control over what I had the ability to do, and that was to pull back on the reins. And I love that you talk about, like, that kind of dichotomy of control, because we all do have a degree of power over certain things, but that can be powerful. Like, and I love the 5 steps, the five baby steps. It's like, because one of the things too is, like, certainly you can't affect if you're going to have a car accident or not, but you can make sure you have insurance. You can make sure that you have an emergency fund. Like, that's one of the things that you have an emergency fund for. Last month, we had in my house, a bunch of our dogs got sick. It was really not fun, but they got bit by a tick, and the tick caused like a babesia. It wasn't babesia, but it was a similar tick-borne disease. One of our dogs got really sick, and luckily, we had enough set aside into our emergency fund that we were able to put some money for that. And, but it was like the medicine to treat all of our pups was about 300-400 bucks. It was not cheap, but like, we love our dogs and we weren't going to be like, deal with it, guys, you know? So we were able to weather that because we had made choices beforehand, but we had the power to make those choices.
Right. Couldn't agree more. Um, there is a mentality shift there that not everybody's willing to take yet. I think everybody's
Yeah.
capable of it, but it does drive the rest of the train. Um, you know,
There was a guest that came on that talked about how everyone has a relationship with money. We all do, whether we realize it or not, whether it's a good relationship or not, but we all have a relationship with money. But the type of relationship depends upon, excuse me, what you're willing to do and how you're willing to interact with the money. I want to ask about your relationship with money. When was it that you noticed your relationship with money started to really change and to become more healthy?
um, I would preface this with saying having more money does not necessarily mean it's more healthy.
Oh,
That
tell me
is a
more. Tell me more.
huge little asterisk there. I would say in high school, I just love business. I would find neat ways to make money. In college, my freshman year, I came in and I would have like study guides for tests ready to sell to people. It's
Nice.
like, hey, you can bring a one-page study guide into this test. Already got it for you. I got everything on it. $20, and so I'd make $100 a test or something, and they try to haggle with me like, what, are you can't take 10? I'm like, nah, man, price is the price. So started business early, just doing random things. Disc golf, have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, of course. I love disc golf.
So I would jump into like the local pond and go grab all the discs out of the water, and anything that didn't have a name or a phone number on it was up for sale. And so, like, just these random small things, I thought it was fun. Um, I've I saw the way that my parents lived. They had they were divorced when I was 4, and my dad lived in like a trailer, and it wasn't one of the nice ones, right? This is like one you can go buy for under 10 grand, and it's just not a good spot to be in. And then my mother, she got most of the divorce money and bought a larger house. And that's all. They were house poor. I mean, the mortgage took probably 40-50% of her pay. And like, we didn't have money to get the heat fixed on Christmas, that type of thing. So it was a larger house, but it was for show. It wasn't really, you'd rather live in a 1,200 square foot house than a 2,200 square foot house without heat. Right.
Right.
So there's like a lot of things I saw that I didn't like. I didn't like mowing the yard. I have like some asthma, but I'm the child, right? So I go and mow the yard. That's my chore. And I eventually thought, I'm just going to pay somebody to do this when I get older. And I was like, well, I guess I can just leverage other people's time with money if I have more of it. And so then I got kind of greedy. I'm still kind of greedy a little bit, but so I started studying accounting. I did math a lot in high school. I lived in Texas originally, and you could compete against other schools and academics, kind of like football, but it's academic based. So they had science, math, accounting, whatever. And I did the math stuff. I'd make it to state, but wouldn't really beat anybody there. You just make it. But the accounting thing, I studied a little bit about that, and we did really, really well with very little effort. I'm like, okay, so this is the way to win. And also, you get scholarships from the state of Texas if you win, right? So I'm like, oh, well, why wouldn't I just do this? It'll pay for itself by my study time if I go and win this. So that's what I did, and we did really, really well. And I was like, okay, this accounting thing works. Went through it in college, and I was a teacher assistant in the accounting department. And that's where I met my business partner, Austin. He was also a teacher assistant there. We just got together and uh, thought both of us were ambitious and willing to put in the work to get the results. So that's why we're together in business now. But I would say um, I chose my jobs based on what could pay the most, and I saw bad work environments sometimes. Like the big
Mm,
CPA firms, the culture is absolutely horrible. Not all of them. I can't generalize like that. But if you've ever seen The Wolf on Wall Street, take all the
yeah,
bad stuff, and that's how some of the CPA firms are run internally without all the fun. So, like staplers are getting thrown at people, um, yelling, screaming matches, things like that. We hate that. That's
yeah,
not a place that I want to live or culture I want to be in. And the firm that I worked at previously, great vibe, great culture. They just weren't willing to. The public accounting industry basically compensates you over time. So the longer you're in it, the more you make. They don't care about how many hours or how ambitious or how good your work product is or anything like that. It's more of a tenured thing, which is
mm,
ridiculous. No other industry is really like that. So that's why we started our own thing, because my wife found out that she was pregnant and we needed to make more money for her to stay home with our daughter. And that position wasn't going to pay quite enough. So we started our own business, and I haven't had to go get another job yet. So that's our indicator of success. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I think I've just made a lot of good decisions, but you have to wonder why you work so hard. I can tell you that if you're working to make more money and you're not spending it, you're probably working for something else, not
Mm,
necessarily the money. I thought I was greed filled for a while because I would spend more time working than with my family when I had a choice to go spend more time with family. And so I took a step back and it's like, well, is it about the money? Am I spending the money that I'm making? No. Am I giving it away? Some of it? Okay. So it's not necessarily about the money. It must be about something else. Well, I was greedful in a way, not for money, but for reputation or status. Or I just want people to know who I am.
yeah.
I want people to appreciate the work that I do for others. And so that's what I was wanting to build, not an empire full of cash. So that's kind of a way you can dissect greed, I guess. At least that's what I've discovered. I'm still working on it, of course. Nobody ever has it all figured out, but
Right? No one does. And I love that you're saying that, man, because one of the things too that I there's a lot to unpack there. But I want to talk about greed, but I also want to talk about the purpose and the why. Because I feel like for me, I was always, I didn't really think about money or care about money or worry about money. I was like, ah, you know what? It is what it is. But one of the things that changed for me was when I had my daughter because, it's okay. Like, I can get the cheap thing. I can do this or that. But for my daughter, um, I want to be able to afford to get her a private tutor. I want to be able to afford to get her a little bit more help in her studies if I need to. I want to make sure that we have the money to pay for the medical visit that we need to. If she, like she chipped her tooth or a filling fell out, we're not quite sure. She was chewing on some gummy bears tonight, not a hard food. And she's like, something fell out of my tooth. I immediately messaged the dentist that we go to, and I was like, okay, yeah, we need to come in and get this fixed. But my why is to make sure that I can provide a level of safety and financial freedom to my family. Simon Sinek has this great book, Start with Why. And it literally is it's like you have to have purpose or have your reason for doing things. You don't expect that you're going to be able to motivate anyone else too if you can't answer the question of why. Now, when you have people come to you and they start talking about, aligning money with purpose, what do you think is the first step someone can take to do that?
I think that question is a good one. There's a lot of people that come to me and say, "Hey, I want a tax plan to be most efficient for the rest of my life. Like the retirement structure, what accounts are where, what assets are where, the taxation of it all." And first question is, what's your end goal, right? And if they don't have that, it's hard for me to give them an answer. And a lot of times I have to let them leave the meeting with nothing because they and their spouse haven't talked about what their end goal is. Is it give 90% of it to charity and the rest of it to their kids? Is it the reverse? Is it you want to be able to spend every dollar and let your kids work hard like you did because they're just going to blow it? Or do you not have any kids? That's a different question that we run into, and more frequently, actually. Do you have no other family? Do you like? There's a whole bunch of different things and factors that go into that. Of what's your end goal? Because if you're going to make a plan for something, you kind of know what you're planning for, right? And
Right.
and that's all they know is I have this bundle of stuff, and I'm supposed to go to this guy that gives me advice on what to do. Which is fine. I don't expect them to know the tax law, tax code, whatever, strategic planning. That's my job to help. But
Yeah.
they don't usually get past the I know I need to go talk to this guy, not necessarily I need to go talk to him because X. This is my goal that I'm trying to achieve. So it does really go back to what's the goal, what's the plan, what's your vision for what you're leaving behind, your legacy per se. That's a buzzword, but um, yeah.
One of the things that I think I want to talk about legacy. I love that. You're using words I love. One of the things I think people don't realize early enough, and I was talking to some of my students that I taught for a long time, media and communications, and um, one of my students was coming to me and asking about something. And I said, "Well, what do you want your legacy to be?" He's like, "Man, I'm 22 years old. I don't need to think about legacy." And I said, "But if you start thinking about what it is that you're going to leave right now, what is the story? What are the stories that you want to tell? What do you want to communicate to people? What is it that you want to be remembered for?" He's like, "Well, I don't know. I'd like people to think that I'm this." I was like, "All right, that's a start. That's a start. You want people to think you're kind, you're generous." Like, well, those are points that we can work from. For me, when I was teaching, I taught a content creation class, and it was interesting because that's what I've been doing. I've been creating media for a long time, and I had these kids that came in and they're like, "I want to be famous," and I was like, "Okay, you know what? But that's not going to be the easy way to get there. Like, that's going to be hard. I want to be famous. Well, what type of content are you going to make with that? Like, you could make anything." And then I had one guy that was like talking about his car. And all these guys are like, "Oh, he's talking about his car. That's so dumb, man. Why are you talking about your car?" Well, the guy started telling the story about his car. It's like a Subaru WRX. It was a Subaru WRX STI. It was a really lovely car that he and his dad worked on together. They kind of cleaned it up. They got a beat up one. They made it nice, made it beautiful, and it was the side thing, and they did it in a really smart, financially smart way. And he took really good care of it. It wasn't a brand new car; it was an older car that he had done with his dad. And then it was something they worked on together. And his dad had passed away, and it was the thing that he had that was kind of the bridge between the two of them. And you know what? When he made content about that car, there was heart, there was passion, there was something deeper in it because there was something. It wasn't just a car to him. It was this thing that was a symbol to fatherhood. It represented, what it means to be a good dad, what it means to be a good human, how you can appreciate beauty with the people around you. That was his why. And when he started making videos about his car, it wasn't videos about his car. Everyone thought it was videos about his car. It was videos about happiness. It's videos about joy. It was videos about family, and that's where they got confused. But he knew his why. His why was to celebrate the memory of his dad, and he couldn't articulate it that at the beginning. He couldn't articulate that at the beginning because he's like, "I just thought I wanted to make things about my car." But when he was finally able to see what it was he was trying to do, and I was like, "Dude, you're 22 and you just figured out your why." And he's like, "Wow, this is amazing. I just figured out my why." And I said, "And your why might change. Your goals might change. Your purpose might change. But if you can kind of find something that can be a North Star for you, it can be, a guiding light." And I mean, earlier on, you mentioned spirituality. Well, maybe that is your spirituality. Maybe it is your. For my father, it was always this mission of service. He did not want to make to retire with 100 million in the bank. He wanted to have his entire life to be a life of service where he made other people's lives better. And he's coming up on his 80th birthday this year, and he is still going strong, and he is still walking his purpose, walking his mission. There is not a weekend that I call my dad and I'm like, "Hey dad, how you doing?" He's like, I'm busy right now. Can you call me back?" And I was like, "What are you doing today?" He's like, "All right, well, we're at the church and we're doing this food drive and I got to help people and I got to carry these things in and out. I'm cooking food." And, and it wasn't about the wealth and the riches for him, but he had purpose. And he has been wealthy beyond measure from the other things in his life. And so I love that you had mentioned these things about thinking about purpose and thinking also about kind of your values and your mission, because it makes a difference.
Yeah, you hit on a couple things that I really like. Um, know your why. That is a pretty famous line. Um, I think a lot of people get into this spot where they think they have to find something they love to do and then do that. I've seen that turn people into losing their thing that they love, right? So it can have a like explosive effect. But what I think a lot of people end up doing, and this is what I've done, and this is what I've heard other people that are either entrepreneurs, self-employed, or entrepreneurs, people who work inside of a business and grow up with the business that become COOs and things like that, is they find something they're really good at, okay? And then they just work on that. And over time, like in accounting, I was really good at it. So that's what I did. But because I was good at it, I thought, why can't I be number one? And I became passionate and loving it rather than just being good at it. So oftentimes, finding something you're good at and working on that will inspire and invoke the passion and the love for the aspect or the thing that you're working on. And you also talked about legacy. Um, the last 5 years of your life, you don't know when those will be. Number one, number two, those are not the 5 years to start working on your legacy, right? Oh man, he was a really great guy for the last 2 years of his life. When was the last time you've ever heard somebody say that? That's not a that's not a thing people say. That guy always held the door open for me for the last 20 years. That's the stuff that you hear. And so the day to work on your legacy is today, not necessarily later. They think of it as like a long time, long term thing, something that happens after you die, but it's really what you're building today.
I love that. You know, there was this beautiful video of this guy in World War II who helped all of these people during the Holocaust. And this was a real video that they had this man sitting in this room, and he was sitting there amongst all these people. And suddenly they had the people turn to him and they were like, "I just want you to know something. All these people sitting around you are all people that you saved." And, and he just broke down in tears.
I can imagine.
And all these people, yeah, right. He was just overblown, over like emotionally overwhelmed with the emotion. And it was not something that he was sitting there going, what's my legacy? He was just living it. He was doing it, you know? And the other day I sat down and I wasn't sitting down. I was driving home with my daughter after she had a martial arts class. And suddenly I saw this blind man trying to cross the road. And so I pulled my motorcycle over. And my daughter, I sat her down, I got her in a safe place, and I said, "Just stay right here." And I walked over and I didn't say anything, but I just kind of walked beside the man as he crossed the street. And my daughter looked at me and she's like, "Well, that was a nice thing to do." And she's like, "Why did you do it?" And I said, "Because no one else was." And at that moment we have to do something. And it made a difference. And when she's like, "Well, I love it that you're always doing that, always doing stuff like that." And I was sitting there going, "All right, that's something I'm building." That's something I'm building. I'm repeating that. And I mean, and we can repeat lots of different activities in our life. You wake up late, you don't go to the gym, and you repeat those over and over and over, and they will have an effect on you. If you wake up late all the time, maybe people don't trust that you're going to get there on time. If you don't go to the gym all the time, maybe it doesn't hurt you for the next 5 years, but maybe in 30, you're straightening up your back and it makes the funny noise and you're like, oh, now I've got a back problem. And you go in and they're like, well, you didn't really take care of your body and now you have some joint degeneration, those little actions that we take. And it comes back to what you were saying in the beginning. We've got that dichotomy of control. We've got the stuff we can control and the stuff you can't. And I think it's so important to look at, knowing the difference between those. I got one last question for you. If you could go back and give advice to your younger self about your legacy or about anything in general, especially financial, what advice would you give yourself?
What advice? It's probably not going to be financial. Uh, the reason why is I think with all the resources today, people like you or people that do free advice or there's information out there, it's easily accessible. Probably something more along the lines of something that's hidden. Um, I would. I never went and saw a counselor after my parents passed until this year, and so that was 7 years after mother, and then 9 years after father. So I'd probably tell myself go see a counselor because that's not what weak people do. That's what people that want to free up their headspace do. So that's the advice that I would probably give.
That's beautiful. Well, I think that's beautiful advice because my mom's a therapist, and I know there are many people that that came to her and whose lives were transformed by that. So I love that advice, and I think that any of us, and man, I know there's a whole new field of financial therapists too, man, and I'm loving that that is a thing because I think one of the most beautiful things you can do, and like that's what I was talking about earlier with this. Um, you know, people have things that weigh on them, and you don't know what that might be. For each person is carrying. Each person that you meet is fighting a different battle that you will know nothing about. And every person's battle is unique to them that they are dealing with. But the reality is that every single person can benefit from speaking and sharing and having someone listen without judgment, without sometimes without even giving advice. So powerful, powerful words of wisdom, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing me on and asking me so many thought provoking questions. It's way more mindset and emotion than I thought. I was thinking it'd be more analytical, and so I'm glad that you brought me on. It helped me process some things out loud that I haven't quite connected before. And so, yeah, thanks for bringing me on.
I appreciate that, man. Well, where can people find out more about you and your services and what you do?
I'm big on LinkedIn. I just post random stuff that I think is funny or actual financial advice on LinkedIn. And my website just gives some details about what we are as a company, who we help, and best ways to help others.